So great. Well, hello, Yvonne. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I know I miss our connections, but here we are. When I say miss it, well, we're all both so busy, which is a great thing, isn't it?
We're navigating a lot of different things. Yes, life is full of life. It's how I like to relate to it.
Well,
Yeah.
life is full of wanting to live,
Oh yes. Yeah.
and I think that's the dichotomy that we see. This on one side, it's life being constricted, and on the other side, it's life, exploding. It's just so fascinating.
Ready to burst. Yes, it's breaking through the cracks wherever it's been cemented in substantially. Yeah.
Yes, yes, as nature
Place,
will.
place called Australia at the moment is wow. It is. If we thought that helter
Finally.
skelter was a thing, it's taken a nosedive in the gravity of that, and of course that then has an effect. So instead of being the victim in that, there are a lot of people being severely victimized from my observations. But it's then what does the collective do towards that? And there's a great rising coming up. The original, or as they are called, the aboriginal communities are putting calls out to the world to say, hey, please, somebody pay attention, because what's happening here is when the military gets involved, it gets a little bit challenging to how do
Yes.
you stand up against that. But there is a great rising, breaking through the cracks of the cemented in both mindset and lifestyles, because they are being broken open because there's so much being changed. I see for myself in that there is a lot of frustration and kind of anger coming to the surface. But when I witness how the people are quote unquote demonstrating their stand for freedom, I just feel waves of love and togetherness, and we got this, and this is just it is us, the people. And so I'm very, very inspired to be a fly on the wall and witness that from a distance. Today's conversation is about forgiveness, and I felt that in order to become more free within my own experience, it's been so relevant to even learn what it even means. And I see that this as a tool and as a gift and as a practice is for any human being really relevant, unless we want to stay stuck in the stories of, I'm they and it happened to me. Of course, that it did, but it's what we do with it, and how do we transform it. And I'd love to just have you open with you sent through this beautiful piece that you wrote, and of course, these subjects that we choose are kind of timeless. They're about human ecology. It's not like we're diving into the latest crypto conversation. Um, but you send a beautiful I would call it prose or a poem, um, all the way back from 2006, because you've been in this field for a while, and it was just music to my soul. And I would just hand it over to you with that.
Well, that's interesting because sometimes we get our messages a little crossed because when I sent it to you, I said I wanted to use it as a completion to our conversation, and you posted it, so I actually took it off. But having said that, I think it's a great opener because what I would like to share is the story behind this particular piece of prose. So, I think it was 2006, yes, 2006, I took my youngest son, who's now 39, back to my home country because my children, having a Malaysian family as one side and a Dutch family on the other, um, that, of course, Malaysia is really close, so we spent a lot of time in Asia, and they had really no idea of my roots. So each one has gone back to see where my original childhood began, and so this was his turn. And what happened was that we went to see. I've mentioned before that my maternal ancestry, I lost 90% of them sacrificed their lives, through the atrocities of fascism in World War II. And so I've got very few relatives that are still living on that side of the family. But there was one who I was still, I really had a love connection to. So, I took him to visit them because my uncle was at that stage 90. And I thought, well, that was really old, but I'm not actually too far away from that. However, um, my youngest son had never really spent time with people of that age, and he just wanted to take them and put them in his pocket because he loved them so much. But when we sat there and started, communicating, my aunt asked me a question, and which my uncle wasn't too happy about. And she said, "Can you give me what do you think about this?" So she related a story about a German person who had been part of these atrocities and had come to a friend of theirs who was a rabbi to ask for forgiveness. And the rabbi forgave him, much to his family and his friends and everyone else's horror. How could you? So my aunt asked me, what did I think about that? And I thought for a little while, and then I told her what I thought, the meaning of forgiveness was for me. And she listened and she said, "Will you write that down for me?" And I went, "Oh, okay. What did I just say?" So we were there for 4 days, and my son and I were in a hotel not nearby, and every day he'd say, "Mum, have you written that down for Auntie yet?" And I'm going, "No, nothing's coming." And it was the last morning before she was picking us up and taking us to the station to go to Brussels. And 7 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and they said, "Right. So now I would like to share with you what came through that morning." And as I was sitting up there writing, my son suddenly got up and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "It's just come." So this is it. Forgiveness. To move from victim to victor. To forgive is a choice made from a courageous heart, a heart ready to give up the need to blame. To forgive is not to condone the other's behavior, but to move forward in a better place. To forgive is to take back one's power, disallowing the constriction of another's actions. To forgive is to heal my wound, knowing that the other person will have to deal with his or her own conscience. To forgive is to let go of pain, anger, blame, and regret, not to set the other person free, but to set me free from any negative influence the other has in my life. To forgive is to choose love over hate, meaning that the love for me is greater than the hate for another. Ultimately, I forgive you, not for you, but for me. Because when I am big enough to forgive you, I know I am healed of old wounds. I am free from pain, and I am once more whole. Forgiveness is my choice and my salvation. It sets me free.
Thank you, Yvonne. I wish I could post that here in the chat. I think that I want to have that printed on a piece of paper and hang it on my wall in a little framed. Um, so beautiful. Yeah, it was very interesting how in our conversations I've been outsourcing um, the subject matter at hand. I'd be like, well, Yvonne has got her team. She's got a whole team. I'm just working by myself, which is not true. But anyways, that's my illusion that I was under for a while, and our conversations have opened me up again to a lot more. Where I'm like, oh, I could actually just close my eyes and just ask and get the insight that I'm trying to unlock in my busy brain pathways. But I've been outsourcing, of course, the topic of our conversation to you, and it's very nice how you just kind of gently just gave it back and said, "Well, how do you feel about you coming up with a topic?" And I've been sitting with that obviously for a while, and I thought that this topic would be so, I don't know, add resistance to bringing it forward, because pretty much the day after I was like, all right, I think we're going to be talking about forgiveness. And I was like, do I really want to talk about forgiveness? That story going on. And then I got really exceptionally preoccupied with navigating a whole bunch of things. So I managed to just quickly type a little post-it note to you, which, without even saying this is the topic for that I'm suggesting we explore. And as I was sitting with it over the days, I was like, why is this even relevant for my cells? And because it's so easy to think, well, this would be a good topic for other people to hear about. Because, if other people hear about this topic on forgiveness, then maybe they'll, find more about themselves, their freedom, their own return to sovereignty, their sense of feeling more at ease and at peace in a world, because they take back their own responsibility. And so I was grappling with that concept, and it took me back to my time when I started really going within. And one of the things that is part of my kind of pathfinder journey is that I pull things apart. I go down to the roots, I go down to the origins. I use nature as the patterns in that as the template. So I go down to the mycelial network underneath the ground, inside the soil, like inside the soul of our being. And I kind of introspectively look also at language in terms of where have we been confounded, perhaps. What does this word even mean? There's so many word sounds that we are just using, and we all just think that the other person knows exactly what we're saying, but a lot of these words have a very limited meaning because they're nouns. And any word that is a noun that doesn't actually exist is a still object. It's a concept that isn't living, isn't moving, isn't energy in motion. And so language for me, ever since I was a little boy, has been something amazing, because, and I thought everybody was experiencing it like this, because when people talk, I see a movie. The language of images is how I relate to reality. So when people speak with beautiful imagery, I get all excited because it kind of flares up through my internal vision, but I know it's coming directly out of my heart where the projector comes from. And when I became aware that other people, because I never questioned it, it's just what I was born with, when I realized much later in life that other people actually don't necessarily have that, or they're not presently aware to it, I became really curious around language. And so particularly around this word forgiveness, I really went into it. And what does it really mean? And so I wrote a little bit towards that as well. I think it's in the description. And for me, what was so striking is that when you sent through this beautiful writing that you just read out, is that the way that you spelled forgiveness is exactly how I have chosen to write forgiveness. Because forgiveness is usually FOR, Giveness. Gosh, that is amazing that I was able to do that. But it's not really how it's spelled. And to forgive is in the etymology of language, when the words are pulled apart, we have for and we have giveness. And how it came to me is that when we look at what where the word for is being used, is to forego something, is to um, find the place of a moment in time, and it's like a significant timestamp, so to speak. And there is a way to relate it in how it landed for me, is that it's about forgiveness is about going to the place before something was given. And so we are imparted with an imprint or an experience that now sits in our, and it's time stamped in our being. I was 6 years old. I was witnessing my father doing this. And so it is anchored on a kind of invisible timeline on a certain place within our being. And in order to no longer be held captive, or for that no longer to be performing a function with purpose because it wants to be liberated, it's a burden to live with things that haven't been forgiven yet. And this may be a new concept for some people, but I certainly learned, once I grappled and kind of unpacked the languaging, that it was about me going to the place before I was given something. I understood all of a sudden for myself why forgiveness is so relevant, because I did it in a very kind of Christian like way, and I just yeah, because that's what I was growing up with. I was just asking for forgiveness and putting it outside of myself, and by having some external authority forgive me, I could therefore free up this shame, this guilt, this imprint that was also stuck on my timeline, if it was related to me. But then I had a really challenging time working out how to even discover where others had trespassed my sovereignty and where it's set on my timeline. And so when I learned about going to the place before I was given something, I realized that in that place I was free. So I was feeling held back because of an awareness that I had around an experience that was still bothering me. And I wasn't bothered before that experience was given to me. And so once I kind of unpacked the kind of syntax that is inscriptive as to how I can navigate the process of forgiveness. And it may be an overtly intellectual approach, because forgiveness is a real feeling-based experience. It's not something, well, I'm gonna take myself down to the timeline before this was happening, and I erase everything that comes after. The only way that I can go to the place and live in the freedom of before something was given is to really therefore then forgive and engage in the transformative process of forgiving the other for their trespass, their violation, their um, coercing of my sovereignty, of my freedom. And I found it something that has become, through that kind of like intellectual roadmap, something that I kept applying. It's like, oh, I want to be free of this. Oh, I need to take myself to before this happened to me. But the way to do that, I need to properly, therefore, forgive. And I would like to invite you, Yvonne, to share how you've navigated that process, because we can do it intellectually and just ask, either God or somebody else for forgiveness. But you so beautifully wrote about it, that it's about becoming free within ourselves. And I, yeah, I would love to just hear how you practically have experienced and are also sharing around that with others.
Wow. You said when you thought about the subject, you had resistance. Well, when I read that thing, I totally ignored it actually, because in my world today, forgiveness is associated with judgment. So, as I have worked pretty diligently about removing judgment from my world as much as I can, there's nothing to forgive. It doesn't exist. And I thought, well, this is going to be a short conversation, because I'm going to say, well, get rid of judgment and forgiveness is done. But, but of course it isn't. And the more I thought about it, the deeper it became. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a doozy. And you said, yes, it's not, you do this for others. But so let me share this journey of forgiveness for me. It started on the journey that we've all got to travel to this new experience of life within us. And that is the journey of self-love and self-acceptance. And because our self-dialogue is so damaging, through the stories, we're never good enough, we're inadequate, we're not pretty, we're the wrong color, we're whatever. We really give ourselves probably a harder time than anything anyone can do outside, but we don't see that. And so the journey to self-love starts with self-forgiveness. And for me, the word, you say you see pictures. Well, we have that in common, that we have this sensitivity to language. I see frequency, or I don't see, I feel frequency. So every word has a resonance of a vibration that is either high or low. And yes, I spelt it forgiveness, and it is that word for is for me is going forward. I cannot go forward whilst I carry anything that is self-damaging, and that is any story about me, or any story about another, or a story that says that happened to me. So for me, forgiveness starts with total acceptance. When we can accept that whatever happened or is happening, whatever is, you cannot change it. We spend so much time wishing things hadn't happened the way they happened. Well, they did. And when we really become self-sovereign, we realize that every one of those occurrences is the apprenticeship to becoming. When we stop judging them as right and wrong, and we accept them, so, okay, that didn't feel good. So how can I grow from it? How can I expand from it? Then it becomes, as you say, a function with purpose. And then there's really nothing to forgive. But as soon as we see things as being bad, then we carry them. And so the journey for me in that word forgiveness is to give myself the freedom to move forward without it, which is, in just a different way of what you were saying, right? And that just takes it has to come back to our self-love. Because the more we love self, the less we'll allow someone to harm us, to hurt us. And the other thing too, this is something that I learned a long time ago. We get really hung up what other people's opinions of us, right? We spend so much time worrying about what the other person thinks of us. That's one thing with age that really you drop. But you can drop it sooner than that if you like. And for me, what I learned was that another person's behavior and another person's words and expression tells you nothing about you, tells you everything about them. If you stop looking to be offended. Glenn Dye had that lovely phrase, do not go around your life looking to be offended. And I think that's a gem. People that are happy and are in love with themselves, they spread that, they radiate that energy, and they love you openly and honestly and without, without any condition. Loving unconditionally is one of the toughest things for us to be able to do in this human form, and maybe unattainable, but we certainly strive for it. And so, the more that you come from that place, which disallows judgment, the less forgiveness is necessary. So, the less you need to go back and go, it's okay. Well, as I said, forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay, it's about you have no longer any impact or power over me that restricts or constrains my growth and expansion to being my authentic, beautiful, natural self. And I guess, does that help a little? But before I ask you to go to what I've always also felt as I, really sat with it like you did, is that we're about to go into a time where many people are going to feel betrayed. They're going to be feeling betrayed by the people that they have trusted to give them the right information. And we, as way showers, or whatever you want to call us, who have signed up for this journey, yeah, we need to be there with an open heart. And we need to show them, because that is when forgiveness is going to need to be number one tool to move forward and to give yourself your life back.
Yeah, that's partly why I brought the unfolding in what's happening in the place called Australia forward in the beginning of the conversation. And it's so nice to kind of come back to that, because it is really, what do we do with it, but how do we navigate this, and how do we come to terms with that? Not only have we been lied to, because the greed and power and corruption, it's just part, part of human damage. It's part of the mind virus, and it's very tempting for those that are prone to those kind of wanting always more. It's an unsatiable virus that has lived in humanity for ugh, gosh, eons. But the quote unquote layman or normal person is in this process of the so-called great awakening, awakening to some startling truths that are about, wow, not only has there been corruption and misuse of power, but I've been, quite frankly, entirely lied to. I've been misinformed with malintent. I've been betrayed, and the effects of that. Although I see currently a lot of people joining arms and hands to celebrate that, we the people. I also know that in people's individual homes, in their own heart space, in their own internal dynamics, they have so much to grapple with. And I'm not saying that, right now is the perfect moment to, forgive your local premier while he's still uh, going about and rolling out so-called mandates, which is, if again, if we look at the language of all of that, it's all a joke. People send me stuff and I send it back to them. It's like, look at what they're describing this mandate with. They're putting rules around it. You know where rules apply? Rules apply in a game. Rules aren't laws. Rules aren't statutes. Rules are the rules to a game. So we're in a weird game field here. But I see, as to what you just said, there being a relevancy to have an awareness on how to actually navigate that profound, not just disappointment, but this sense of betrayal, this sense of, I've worked all of my life with this notion that, at least, if I just do my bit, then everybody else does their bit. and then to kind of have to come to terms with that there seems to have been a really kind of sickness brewing all along that is now bursting. You so eloquently described it as one of these kind of pussy wounds that finally is, bursting open. I feel that it's so relevant for people to have that awareness on how to navigate that process of becoming free from the toxicity that also can breed, and the congestion that can cause in people's biology, because naturally there's anger there, naturally there's going to be upsetness, but then ultimately it's like, how are we going to are we going to keep blaming somebody? Quite personally, I see that there is a lot more change still requiring to happen. A lot more standing up is going to take place. But as you said, at some point, we benefit having centers where this type of awareness, because we can't rebuild a new earth with the grudges and the begrudging frequencies and projections, and because it's good to be in the awareness that we don't want to do it like that again. But if we build our new models on, we don't want to repeat that, well, guess what is going to happen? We are just going to set ourselves up to create what happened over there. And so that piece that you speak towards is so relevant in relationship to the process of forgiveness, so that we can become free and no longer be stained or held back or compromised in our dreaming of how to dream into being a world that is free of all of that. Not because we don't want to have a world free of all of that because we don't want that, but a world free of all of that simply because that which we become free of was only unnatural in the first place. It was damaging, it was distorted, it was manipulative, it was coercing, it was centralizing power, all of these things. The dreaming that I hold within myself is free of that. But in order to be able to kind of emanate that dreaming, I got to go here and see, well, what sits in the way of that actually being a vision for, I don't have a better word for it. I call it yay. I don't want to paint pictures too lofty with rainbows and blue skies, and it's just like this full double yay feeling, like, yes, that is where everybody can thrive, everybody can shine, everybody can cooperate, collaborate, and express themselves in their unique gifts and talents. um, I'm gonna just stop there, and I want to go back to you on that and see where you will take that.
Well, I'm sitting here just, the word yay is fantastic. It's pure joy, really. What I am finding, though, Sovereign, is that people are lacking the tools of knowing how to, their soul's calling them home, and they're stepping into love. And I am so proud of Australia. Finally, they poked the giant just once too many times. And boy, when it stood up, it stood up. However, yes, it's wonderful to share, and I know everybody who goes to these wonderful demonstrations comes home absolutely elated because everyone is there in love and camaraderie and joy, which is fine. However, when we come back to the home, and we then need to find a new way of living, and that is what you're talking about. And I want to bring it back to forgiveness because um, it seems to be a topic that people have learned about and study and put a lot of energy into. But for me, it's a very simple thing, and I keep coming back to, if you need to forgive, you are still in the 3D matrix, because as we traverse out of that energy of opposition into the energy of oneness with nature, once more living consciously as a part of nature, which is what we are. I often say we are the flowers of humanity. Humanity is the tree of life, and we are the flowers. And yet we are constantly judging that one flower is better than the other, and one flower smells and the other flower doesn't. And, it is ludicrous. It's laughable. I said to one of my students yesterday, can you imagine if you were floating above, which I do quite often, and look down at humanity? I mean, you would be splitting your sides with laughter at the ridiculous behavior. You go, what are those people doing? Do they not understand this precious gift of life that they get at birth? Yes, and so this topic of forgiveness has, like so many other things, been hijacked to the point, particularly I think in the world of spirituality, where if you haven't done forgiveness, you cannot move on. Well, then if you don't know what forgiveness really is and how to do it, you're kind of stuck, aren't you? And this is why I keep coming back to when you brought up the subject of me going, oh, hang on a minute, I have to go back to when that actually was some sort of a reality in my world. Because what I recognized was that moving out of this matrix and out of this polarity of right, wrong, comparison, good, bad, better than, when you move out of that matrix, then it doesn't apply. So what I really would like people to consider, to go within and ask yourself, where in your life do you believe it's a story, remember, of conditioning, where in your life do you believe that you need to forgive, either yourself or another? And that is the part that is still stuck in the old matrix. And all that you have to do is to decide, hey, I don't choose to live there. I do not believe in right or wrong or good or bad. I believe in accepting whatever is. I look at it and say, how can I become more? And how can I use that to set myself free? And the quickest way to set yourself free is to drop the judgment, to drop the story about whatever the situation was, either the false self-dialogue about what you have to become to be approved of or to be a good person or whatever else story you're running or standard that you have. I used to say to people when they said, but I'm not, I'm not this and I'm not that. I'm going, and what standard of measurement are you using? Because I haven't found one. What is the standard of measurement that we are attempting to reach to be acceptable, to be appreciated, to be loved, to be good enough? What is that standard of measurement? Because for all I see is every time you get close to it, the goalpost is moved. Because that keeps you in the matrix. So this whole journey of ascension is about moving out of that matrix that keeps you trapped in that belief system that there is anything to forgive in the first place. Now, and I've had some very traumatic experiences in my life, particularly in my, my early days, where everybody tells me that's when when your character is formed. Well, I was screwed right from the get-go. But you see, when I remember when I first went to Indonesia, and I had to stand up in the front of the class to tell them who I was and where I came from, etc., etc. And it wasn't that long after the war, and so the word for this, guy that had that little sign, if I heard that, every cell in my body would just stand up, and all my ancestral hate and would be in my little body. I was only 9 years old then, and so when I look back to that child and the fear that she lived in, and the oppression that she lived in, for me to heal myself to the place where that the word or that name no longer has any effect on my cells whatsoever, meant that I had to accept what was and understand there is no such thing as death. And that whatever another person does or doesn't do, I do believe in karma. I believe what goes around comes around. And I was able to leave him to it and set myself free, because I realized that every time I thought about it and that energy came up in me, it took me away from my authentic self. And my essence is pure love. Love for me, but love for humanity and love for life itself. And it is this need for life to be lived that really fuels me to keep moving forward and keep giving forward with acceptance, without judgment, and with as much unconditional love as I'm capable of in this human form.
Yeah, so wonderful. I'm just looking up the etymology and putting a little picture together just to be able to put it on here. And just reading here is that to forgive is the sense to give up the desire or the power to punish. And what I found is that it wasn't so much all the other people that I needed to forgive. I actually had to work on how to free myself from my own self shaming, self blaming, self hatred, self damaging thoughts, the distorted beliefs around what I did and didn't do, the measurement of standard that I was applying to myself in comparison to people that aren't here, that weren't actually really, they were like a figment of my own subconscious imagination that I wasn't even aware of, that I was measuring myself to others in how I therefore was doing it. And I found it very interesting when I learned that through the process of self-love and self-acceptance, which for me is this kind of trinity of the study of syntropy, the study of nature, which becomes the study of human nature, which is about sovereignty. And if I'm not sovereign, how do I come back to that? Well, the only real way is through self-love, because the practice of self-loving is radical self-acceptance and the process of accepting what has happened in the past to become free, to become sovereign, to actually return to our nature. So I found it very intriguing that, of course, like many humans, I find it more easy to observe behavior in humans outside of myself than to witness it within myself. But I have radically applied the things that I observe outside. I'm like, am I doing that as well? And I found that as a species of creatures, mammals, we are very unique because we are the only species on planet Earth that has, well, we're not the only one that has the capacity, but we're only the only species that is exercising the notion of not accepting what already happened. And so I've listened to people, older people, younger people, humans in general, um, saying things like, well, I can't believe it. I just can't accept it. I can't accept that that happened. And when I kind of set with that, it's like, where do I do this? Where am I not in acceptance? Because when I come into acceptance, there's a psycho-emotional process of release and freeing and reintegration and remembering. I was like, oh, I don't have to do it like this anymore. Whoa, I can actually return to freedom through the process of accepting that what happened did happen, and get myself out of that little hell loop that was just going around and around. I can't accept it. I can't accept it. I'm not accepting it that happened, and it happened. And then, funnily enough, in my experience, these things that were the original first experience of something that I wasn't able to properly process kept reoccurring. I'm not accepting that this is happening. Here it is again. I'm still not accepting it. And the funny thing is that when I went back to the origin point, or the first time that ever such thing happened, and I came into the awareness, like, wow, this has been repeating itself ever since. For me to undo it is to come into acceptance that it did happen. It stopped showing up altogether. Well, how curious is that? Of course, it's a natural byproduct of properly processing the quote unquote unresolved. But I found it so intriguing that as a human species, there's so much time and energy invested in resisting what happened still 30 years ago, to be in disagreement with what has already transpired. And I questioned, like, how can through languaging that become unpacked so that people can actually become aware that that's what they're doing and that it's entirely dysfunctional. It's not working, hasn't worked, isn't working, and isn't going to be yielding any results that are going to be increasing the sense of freedom, the sense of joy, ecstasy, happiness, pleasure, and openness to experience more of what life has to offer. It actually is a very closing off frequency. And so I've been exploring how to translate that, the dysfunctionality of not being in acceptance, of rejecting something, and therefore being in judgment, how to kind of transition that program mentality, because it was hardwired for me. It wasn't just something that I kind of learned when I was 30. No, it was culturally induced states of belief that I was just repeating. I was just patterning of my parents, my siblings, the culture around me, that also didn't know that, oh, if you actually want to be free, you benefit looking within, feeling what is there, working out how you can let go of the story so that freedom can come back forth. And the process could be called forgiveness, but really there is a deeper sense of like accepting that what happened. And yeah, I love how forgiveness is in that sense recreating a timestamp. All right, I've accepted that it's been exactly how it's been, and I can see how it's really set me up for recurring patterns of the same narrative. And I'm willing to accept that I, in the process of it, am able to let go of it. It's just that, as you spoke to it earlier, and I would like to invite you to speak a little bit to that, is that there's so much in this pseudo spiritual, I call it the spiritual new cage movement, that has been spoken around self love, self acceptance, self forgiveness, that when I heard of it and I kind of touched on some of the teachers out there, it wasn't hitting home for me because it didn't have a simplicity to it. And you were eliciting to that a little bit earlier, and I was just wanting to invite you for the last 10 minutes or so to to shine a little bit of light on that, because we can very easily get caught, and I definitely have been a spiritual window shopper for years, and I was caught in not actually really resolving, not actually really transforming, not actually really forgiving, but being more kind of spiritually engaged in the conceptual reality of it.
All right. Yes. Well, we can go down that little road. But before I do that, I'd like to respond to the acceptance, because what I see at the moment is that the people who are still stuck in the matrix and still following the so-called rules, they are in this dream spell of not being able to accept that they could possibly be being lied to. So it is like they will not hear their logical mind, they will not hear their heart mind, because they cannot accept that they're being lied to. This is going to be the biggest trauma that is going to be faced in the years to come, or in the months to come. And for us, I think it's important that we're prepared for that with love and kindness. We need to come back to human kindness, because that has definitely been thrown in the bin by those who are, the elite that are controlling us. There's no human kindness there whatsoever. There's not even any humanness, I don't think. However, that's another subject. So, and now I'm actually forgetting what you asked me to talk about. Can you just enlighten
Hey,
me?
yeah, totally. You spoke earlier towards this, I call it the New Cage movement.
Oh,
I
the
got that.
spirituality. Yes, I'm back on track. Yes, spirituality. And it's, well, okay. So my passion was always, right from the beginning of, I'm incredibly practical, right? So when I went on this journey of spirituality, I said very clearly, well, if this is not going to help me wash my dishes with greater joy, then it's a total waste of time and I'm not going there. And because this is all about bringing heaven to earth. And in the beginning, I think for spirituality, everybody was trying to escape. It was, take me somewhere where I don't have to feel the pain of being human. And that just didn't work for me. And I looked more for a very practical how to. How do I operate me to the highest possibility? I don't have an instruction manual. I need to know, how can I operate me? This incredible gift of life in this incredible human form. And honestly, I don't think anyone has really taught me how to use it, or how to take it to a place where there isn't any struggle or suffering. And why do we need that? Surely, when you look at it from a mechanical perspective, when a machine is struggling and suffering, it isn't working properly, is it? So I didn't really buy that. And I'm thinking, I need to find a way where I can find tools that are going to give me the opportunity to live this gift of life smoothly, with synchronicity, in alignment with nature, which is what I'm part of. I don't see nature struggling the way that humanity struggles. I don't see nature suffering the way humanity suffers. And even when it does, it seems to be able to regenerate itself so beautifully. And that was really what I was looking at, is how can I operate this? And that was my journey of spirituality. It was not about an escapism and finding my way to somewhere that wasn't going to give me a better quality of life right here, right now. Because that, I believe, is my mission. I think it's everyone's mission, is to find the best of ourselves. And it's in there. We just have to, we have to peel off all the conditioned programming that keeps telling us that we're not anything. And that is the journey. So my spirituality, I suppose, is much more practical, foundational. It's a place of, well, how do I become? How do I become? And the way that I found my way to that was to recognize that I am energy first. I am life force first. I wasn't before I took a body, and I will continue to be it when this body is worn out or whatever this body is going to do. And I started to live my life from that perspective, that I am soul and an aspect of Christ consciousness, source, whatever you want to call it, Fred nerd, I don't care. They're just labels. It is that quantum, it's that quantum intelligence that creates life. And this is something that people really are now needing to be, and we talk language all the time, but I know that this field, this transition that we're going through, this ascension, is into a conscious awareness of quantum. We are stepping into being quantum beings. And so that is where my spirituality took me, to understand that I am an expression of that power. And the more that I allowed that, the freedom to express itself through me, the more joyous and the more abundant and the more loving the Von avatar was having. And that seemed
Right.
to work for me.
Beautiful, Yvonne. Um, we're at the top of the hour. I'm gonna start closing us out, but before we do that, I'm gonna see if I can bring this image up properly. I was gonna ask you to see if you would like to close us out with the beautiful message that you. I need to do it as an overlay, then it's gonna work. Let's see. You were just bringing up the language part, and so I'm just gonna stick it on here. Look at that! I just made that.
Oh,
To
that's
forgive
really good.
comes from the Old English to forgivian, to give
Uh-huh.
grants, to allow, to pardon, also to give up. The sense to give up a desire or power to punish. Wow, I was like, well, that's interesting. And what I've been doing, of course, with the language is just pull the words apart, because obviously there's a syllable in there. So if there's two parts to the word and they ended up being used as a combination, um, what is it then that it was beforehand? And that's where I found my kind of language nerd answers, um, that allowed me to see that it's about before. Old English for is about before, in front of, in presence, because of, for the sake, earlier in time, instead of, before, previously, formerly, once, and to give, which is to bestow, to deliver. And that's where I untangled myself with language, so to speak. But I also made this one, Yvonne, so I want to invite you to close us out. If you would like to read this beautiful prose again, and we'll use that as our way to saying goodbye to everybody.
Thank you. And it's been an absolute delight as always. So, yes, I would love to. I opened with it and I'd like to share it with you as a tool to forgive, to move from victim to victor. To forgive is a choice made from a courageous heart, a heart ready to give up the need to blame. To forgive is not to condone the other's behavior, but to move forward into a better place. To forgive is to take back one's power, disallowing the constriction of another's actions. To forgive is to heal my wound, knowing that the other person will have to deal with his or her own conscience. To forgive is to let go of pain, anger, blame, and regret, not to set the other person free, but to set me free from any negative influence the other has in my life. To forgive is to choose love over hate, meaning that the love for me is greater than the hate for another. Ultimately, I forgive you, not for you, but for me. Because when I am big enough to forgive you, I know I am healed of old wounds. I am free from pain. I am once more whole. Forgiveness is my choice and my salvation. it sets me free. Thank you. Bye bye. Forgive yourself.